Yep. Yep. Good morning. It's 11:45, so we'll start. The CDPCers didn't want to sit up here with me because they'd like to see the slides, so they'll come up for the Q&A part of it. But in any event, Barb, if you could flip to the slide that says what we'll cover today. We're going to take a look. I do want to go through this at a pretty good clip because we want to leave lots of time for Q&A on the thing. But what we'll cover is where we are in the process, an overview of the latest floor plans, review again, because over time I think we forget what exactly is getting fixed and improved, take you through the timeline that McCarthy and Smith is putting together for the construction and the preparation for it, as well as expand a little bit on McCarthy and Smith's role so you can get a sense of what they're going to do for us as construction manager. We've divided the CDPC into subgroups and teams, and I'm going to show you those subgroups and give you some more key contacts for you to ask questions and give input to, maybe more importantly, give input. We'll do a quick review of where we are on financing, and then we'll save plenty of time for Q&A. So more than just a welcoming entrance and a fresh face, we're going to do a lot on the inside of the church. If you could go to the next one, Barb. Where we are in the process, I just want to do a quick review. The CDPC solicited input from the programs in various areas of the church about what they would like to see improved. We assessed our current space utilization and created basic concepts for each of the project areas. Fourth, we used certain criteria, which I'll get into in a minute, to evaluate the projects. Sorted them into priorities. We have a couple of folks who are focused on prioritization, but if you'll remember the early days of this, we had projects sorted into urgent, essential, enhancement, and so on and so forth. And then step 6 was we as best we could determine it with the limited amount of information that we had and experience that we had, but took a look at approximate costs for each of the projects that we were talking about undertaking at that point. So Barb, she's ahead of me as usual. The key goals, if you will, were to make BUC more accessible, more welcoming, and more sustainable. And we determined that from the inputs that we got from congregants and particularly from the programs. The key areas of project scope, these urgent and essential things, are Inform Studio, our architectural areas of focus, which you'll see in a minute. And then in addition to that, we felt it was important to refurbish the social hall, at least give it a refreshment, upgrade our restrooms. One that's been added is a closet here in the sanctuary to conceal the band instruments in services where they're not being used. And then in addition, of course, the parking lot is an obvious one, and the sidewalk, some entry landscaping, and our exterior lighting. Those are the key areas that we were focused on. So where we are in the process, we have selected and hired an architect and a construction manager, as you recall, about 9 months ago. We got the architect's first rendering of their vision, which included a bold entry, something that we didn't think was possible, and that is accessibility throughout, that is wheelchair accessibility throughout the campus. And then finally, we conducted a capital campaign, and the steps 8 and 9 really changed the sense of what we thought we could do. We decided once we saw, as a congregation, we decided once we saw the architect's vision for what we might be as a campus, our goals stepped up quite a bit. And in tandem with that, we hired CCS, which was a consulting firm, to help us run our capital campaign, and I tell you, at the beginning of this, we thought, you know, if we can raise maybe $700,000 or $800,000, we'll be doing good and fix the stuff that's broken, but really not enhance the campus in any way. Well, between the architect's vision and the management skills that CCS brought, we now have assets, if you will, pledged assets of $1.5 million to accomplish the project. We came up with an early, mid-range, if you're a mid-time estimate, if you will, of $1.9 million to do the entire project. So we had a question for the congregation, and that is, do you want us to scale back the effort, or do you want us to go with the vision that we've got, fix the things that we're talking about, create the more welcoming and particularly accessible space? That's a big part of the cost equation here. And the congregation, as you know, voted to take on a $400,000 mortgage. 11 and 12, the construction manager has been firming estimates, and there's a real back and forth process that has been going on and will still be going on through August and September, back and forth between the architect and the construction manager and the CDPC and the construction manager and the CDPC and the architect, and it's making sausage, it really is, to work through what you can afford, what you want to do, and every time you push in one direction, it pulls in another, and so you have to make compromises and make decisions. But that's going to happen through August and September. And I'm going to now ask Michael to come up. I think we're at that stage, and talk about the current plan, and then I'll come back in after Michael.
Thank you, Dick. Nice to be with everybody again here this morning. I'm hoping to give a little bit of light in terms of what's probably transpired in the last month and a half to 2 months as we've begun further development throughout the project. As Dick had mentioned, you get into further more details and some different things. You find out some things. You get better estimates on things, and making it all balance. And what we've realized is that the scope of a project touches so many things, even some things that are just general maintenance items, being, hey, we got to do something about the leaking that's over here, and just the quality of the enclosure and or insulation and or mechanical units, things like that. And there's been a lot of sort of pushing and pulling to what do we touch in terms of, hey, this piece of glass over here, are we replacing that, or putting in doors, or putting in grab bars in restrooms, or is it just refurbishing? So you talk about refurbishing, and there's a lot of context of what that can be. And so we're working through a lot of those nuances. Simultaneously, one of the things that we realized in working through, and I wanted to be really clear about this, is talking about the south entry area. And if you could go to the next slide here. Just some clarity on this particular issue when we discuss the idea of how to get accessibility all the way through. I think probably on our part, and I was asked to come and just to clarify this, that we had accessibility so that there were no rails, no grab bars. It was a sloping floor in the lobby, but as you moved towards the gallery area, it was still a sloped floor, but it was seen as, by how code would deal with it, a ramp. And so as we went further through this, there was concern about how steep that would be. So we were asked to look at this again to be able to say, hey, how do we eliminate any kinds of what would be considered technically ramp through that whole area? Another key part of this was, hey, the scope of things was becoming larger. What can we do to maintain the existing conference room exactly as is? And also there was a little bit of concern about in the main area having some of the furniture in a sloping floor. So we've revised a lot of these things. I'd like to give thanks to both Frank and Keith and John for a lot of their input and sending us some sketches and some other things to maybe look at as well. And so this is where we are now. And I think what it allows you to do, I don't have a pointer, and I usually bring one, and I apologize for that, but I'm going to do my best to walk you essentially from right to left in this scheme. And so if you look at the right portion of the lobby, what we have is a totally flat area that allows you to utilize the same entry that goes into the conference room currently, and then all of that seating is effectively on flat ground. And then there would be a bench that would delineate that flat space to what would be the sloped floor. And I want to be really clear about this. It's not a ramp, it's a sloped floor. There's no grab bars, nothing like that. You can sit on either side of the bench because it'll allow you to sit either higher or lower, and there'll be some way that is, as we work through the details of the furniture and how that's arranged, to be able to access it from both sides. As we move a little bit further to the west or to the left, there'll be stairs it'll comprise of 3 risers that will allow you to get to the existing office doors, and then up to where the coats will be put in. Now you can stay on the same level and walk in the area all the way to the left, because that's also at the same existing level of the lobby currently. So only the sloped floor only exists in the middle of the space, and then that takes you, really there's 49 inches that go from the height of the lobby, so you're looking somewhere in here, to the area of the pavilion. We drop 49 inches. We get 19 of those inches, so we go from 49 to 30, where there's sort of a flat area that's transition, and then in that transition area it's a sloped floor in the gallery area going all the way down to the pavilion. So just wanted to clarify where that is now. It's greater than a 1 to 20 slope, so it's not a ramp, it's a sloping floor, and we just wanted to make that clear within that piece. The other aspect that we're now in that we believe that we can do is we've eliminated both brick walls in that area. So when you walk into the entry space, you can now look directly into the Marshall courtyard without any unimpeded views through the existing walls that are there. We've also relocated the double doors that are going out into the Marshall courtyard now, because we'll have a different elevation that'll be there further to the west. So that'll be adjacent to where the offices are that get out into that courtyard. And the other component that we're looking at is essentially a new conference room that will replace kind of the existing RE conference room, but it'll also be accessible to the lobby, so it has a little bit more duality of uses and getting a little bit more space out of the office in and of itself. So that kind of comprises what's happening in the lobby area. If we go to the next slide. Well, more of the same. The vestibule is a little bit larger. The other thing that we're looking to do, and we're really working through the Commons connector and exactly what that is, and that's the degree of either taking out all the steel and replacing the glass or just replacing the glass, and so we're working through some of those ideas. But the idea is that there will be mechanical in that space or accessing that space so that it won't need to be closed off and it won't have deterioration that it's suffering right now relative to the climate aspects. If we go to the next slide. The north area floor plan, that's really staying very much the same as it has conceptually before. There's very little that's changed. Just to be clear on the 2 slopes, if you look at the slopes on the interior, they're very close to matching what the slopes on the exterior are. Those are in fact ramps. There will be handrails on both sides, but they're at about a 1 to 16 slope, so it's going to be shallower than what your typical allowance is for something like that, being 1 to 12. So they'll be shallower than a typical ramp, matching really closely to what's existing. We have to shorten it up just a little bit to give the appropriate landing areas to the doors that get into the classrooms, but not by very much at all. Essentially looking at 5 multi-purpose type of spaces that are there, and then the addition of the 2 barrier-free bathrooms that are accessible all throughout, and it really connects the entire space, all within the interior, all within an accessible area with no stairs or steps or anything like that, so that way all patrons and visitors and anybody can experience going from one space to another without ever having to go outside. I think that covers it. Flip one more and let me see what we've got. I think it's essentially giving you the entire floor plan. Right, so this is the new upper level floor plan now, and so what you see is the sort of contingent where everything has the connectability within it. The only thing that doesn't do is loop all the way back around. So once you come into what would be the green door space, you don't connect back into the lobby. So it comes back around, but everything essentially looks back out into the courtyard. I think the one thing that really adds on the north side as well, if you look within this, is you're now connecting those classroom areas into the courtyard space as much as the lobby is. So it really looks within it rather than having the small vestibules into those. And I think that's something that's maybe been a little overlooked in the positive nature of this, because you have that accessibility corridor that really takes advantage of the doors and the side lights and the glass that are there within those areas. So I'll give it back to Dick and can answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, we'll get Michael on first on the Q&A for the architectural stuff. Thank you. So the process continues. Additionally, in September and October, we're going to finalize the construction schedule with McCarthy and Smith, and the contractor bid documents, which will be finalized between McCarthy and Smith and Inform and ourselves. And there are going to be a lot of decisions. We've had a lot of mashing back and forth. Those are going to be coming focused down to actually making final decisions of here's where the window goes, here's how the door operates, here's what the finishes will look like, and the project will really take shape in September and October. In November, McCarthy and Smith will go out to bid those, because that's the ideal time when the contractors are still a little bit hungrier and don't have all of their stuff put together for spring. We don't want to quote this job in March. And then in December, they will actually award the contracts. Jim Shettle is going to have plenty to do. I don't know if he's still here. But, oh, there he is. During that time frame, because we're going to be also taking a look at, you know, moving and storage and effects on programs and effects on renters and so on and so forth. So Jim's going to be intimately involved in that. Then, on April 1st, the prep work starts. By mid-April, the 15th or the 18th, the actual demolition will occur. The construction should be done essentially by the end of September, and then in the month of October, it's the, oh, this needs to be patched, and this faucet didn't work quite right, and we need a little paint here, and that sort of thing. And then by the end of October, we will be completed. Depending on the weather and quotations and so on and so forth, we'll either do hopefully we will do the rest of the exterior work of the parking lot and landscaping in October, November. There's a possibility that that could slop over to the spring, but our intention is to finish everything by November. Next one, this is not, you're not going to be able to read any of this, but this is McCarthy and Smith's. You can pick this up. This is all being videotaped, and we'll get these slides up on the BUC website so you can look at the various phases of the project, but basically there'll be estimating and bidding, scheduling, coordinating to minimize disruption, getting the permit, qualifying the contractors, the subcontractors, hiring them, paying the subs, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the process is cleanup. And we will post these on the BUC website so that you can actually read the slide with the schedule. And there may be some changes to that too. I mentioned that we are breaking the CDPC. We've broken the CDPC into sub-teams because there's so much going on. Jim Clark and Inta Davis and Jim Shettle will be primarily coordinating with the construction manager regarding the scheduling of what goes on in the actual process. We're very lucky to have Frank Arvan, Keith Brown, John Hammer, and Steve Laurie on staff to interface in this process, and they're taking the lead in terms of interfacing with Inform Studio. We have an aesthetics review team. I've given it the wrong name, Barb, but at any rate, Barb Eschner, Teresa Honold, and Frank Arvan are going to make sure that the finishes that we employ and everything that we do, from paint colors and that sort of thing, respects the aesthetic that we've got here and adds to it, if you will, rather than conflicting with it. Financing, I've been working with Kim Ruiz. I'll get into that a little bit more in the next slide. And then input and communication, I have to admit this is one of the areas we've fallen down on, and I'm not the greatest communicator in the world, but Pam Graham, Sharon Kirchner, and Karen Stanke, along with Barb Eschner, are going to see to that we have regular and multifaceted approaches to communicating with the, we'll try to have once a month town hall meetings so we can update you, and you'll also see things pretty much every opportunity that there is in order of service and on the website and in the monthly newsletter and so on and so forth. So quickly, financing, if you could flip to the next one. Basically, we're at $1.7 million with including our contingency with the construction projects themselves. As you may recall, we spent, including consulting and materials, or the consultants' expenses and materials and so on, we spent $105,000 on fundraising. We're going to have a bridge financing that will bridge the time between the construction project and the end of the 5-year period that congregants are sending in their donations toward this. We'll have bridge financing costs, interest costs of somewhere in the area of $50,000. And we also are going to do a sustainability study that Inform Studio is going to prepare for us with regard to where these construction materials come from, how they're used, what sorts of impact we're having positively or negatively in the construction that we're doing, and legal and insurance costs. The contingency is there of approximately $100,000 because it is a very complex project on an older building, and we just don't know what we're going to run into in some areas when they open up some of these walls. So hopefully, McCarthy and Smith feels confident they won't spend it all, but he said, you're not going to spend none of it either. We're going to run into some surprises. That's inevitable. So at this point, we have the next slide. We have, as our current means rise, and I think they will, our project costs will probably rise too, but we are focused on the budget of not exceeding $400,000 in long-term financing and beating it if we can. So our current means are $1.5 million. We've talked about the mortgage, which will probably end up being, we've had 4 meetings with 2 banks, 2 each, both of whom have told us that they don't see any barriers, particularly to either our construction financing or the mortgage. We will probably, they view us not the way you would a homeowner, or the way a bank would a homeowner. They view us as a business. And so we have to deal with the commercial lenders, which means we won't have a 30-year mortgage. It'll probably be a 25-year mortgage broken up into 5 5-year segments, which, I mean, there's pluses and minuses. It would probably will raise our monthly payments a little bit, depending on what the interest rates are, but it will also shorten the amount of total interest that we pay over the term of the loan. The financing options that we've looked at are conventional, and we're well along the way with that. We intend to have our financing placed by January 31st, so that we're not worrying about that, scrambling for that at the end. We have held a couple of panel discussions. There was a suggestion that if the congregants were willing to fund particularly the bridge loan, which is a short-term loan, should we consider forming an LLC for congregants to lend the money to the church as opposed to going to the bank for it? creating a circumstance where the congregants might get more interest than they might in the bank, and the church might save, is there a sweet spot where the church might save some money on interest and congregants would be liking the interest rate that they were getting. We held 2 panel discussions and kind of got 2 different results. It's Unitarianism. The one panel felt that it would feel too much like going back to the church and asking for more money, and that we ought to wait and do something, perhaps consider something further down the line. The other panel felt that, didn't feel there'd be too many congregants interested in tying up their money for 25 years or 30 years, but probably there would be some congregants who would be interested in funding some portion or all, together, the short-term funding. Nothing decided on that. The board has asked me to go ahead and pursue it, but we're already down the road with the banks, so it's a sort of if the congregants want to do it thing, and if not, fine, we'll handle it through the bank. There's no question that we're tight on the project. As I said, there's a lot of push and pull. We're not going to exceed our budget, but that may have some consequences. With the economic rebound, as you can imagine, and you can see it maybe if you've done any remodeling projects at home, the cost of labor and materials, particularly labor, is up. And so we're pushing up against that. It's a good economy, fortunately. The more that we increase our means, and we're going to continue to try to increase our means, the further we can go. We'd like to have 2 fully accessible restrooms, for example, in the lobby. So we're going to continue to, I know of 3 congregants who have expressed an interest in increasing what they've already done. We're going to go back to, some congregants have said, I only do things 1 year at a time, so come back to me next year and don't talk to me till then. So we're going to wait a year and go back to those folks and follow up. And then, of course, there'll be new congregants too, and we probably won't be shy about asking folks whose circumstances weren't appropriate to donate the first time around, the second. So in any event, we're going to continue to try to increase our means, which will give us one of 3 things. We can either go further with the project, or we can have a cushion for future maintenance needs, or we can borrow less than $400,000. So, or some combination thereof. So we'll keep pushing on that end. So before I get to the Q&A, am I repeating myself, we're going to shoot for monthly town halls to discuss the finishes, the furniture, the scheduling, and so on. We'll use existing BUC communication routes like the newsletter to keep you more updated. We'll consolidate everything into one spot on the website. And CDPC folks are available, and I am, to meet with interest groups and to meet with individuals for that matter as it relates to the